Alright everybody, it is the end of the year and this will be the final video on my channel, and this is the worst slash disappointing movies of the year list. I did my best movies of the year. I did it with Brandon and we had an amazing conversation. It's like 45 minutes long. We talked about a bunch of great movies. We have very separate lists. But for me, I've seen 80 movies this year, so I had a lot of good movies. I've also seen quite a bit of bad ones, not as much as most people have. I plan on seeing a lot more movies next year, so next year's list will probably be a lot worse. But this list is the top 5 disappointing movies and top 5 worst movies. So my 10 through 6 will be most disappointing movies, and my 5 through 1 will be the worst movies of the year. I do have some honorable mentions I will mention later on in the video, but without further ado, let's start off with the disappointing movies of the year. At number 10 is The Cloverfield Paradox. Now this is a movie that really came out of nowhere, and I heard about a new Cloverfield movie coming out at the beginning of the year. This was on my most anticipated list of the year because I love the Cloverfield movies. 10 Cloverfield Lane is great. The original Cloverfield movie is really good, and I was really excited for this one. It came out on Netflix the day it was announced on the Super Bowl. I watched it, and it was just really strange and kind of just was everywhere, all over the place. Nothing really made sense. I mean, if you really like try to push and smash everything together to make it make sense, you can make an excuse for it, but it really just doesn't work all the way around, and it's kind of a messy movie, and this movie really disappointed me. I didn't hate it, but it was fine. It was very forgettable. I don't really want to watch it again, which sucks. I love the Cloverfield movies, and it kind of soured everybody on the franchise in its entirety. At number 9 is Pacific Rim Uprising. Now this is a movie that I fell asleep in. I tried so hard to stay awake. This movie was so boring compared to the first one. The CGI was super glossy, and the whatever they're called, the robots look super clean, and they didn't look as real and gritty, and it just didn't have the feel of the first one, where like Guillermo del Toro did a great job directing the first movie. This one gets rid of pretty much the entire cast. No Idris Elba, no just other actors I can't remember, but this movie was just very forgettable. I have never wanted to watch it since. I never will watch it again. This movie was super boring, not exciting at all. The action was just kind of lame. This movie would probably fit in my number 6 for worst movies of the year. This movie was really bad. The only reason why it's this high up on the list in terms of disappointing is I didn't really have too high expectations for it, but it did disappoint me. This one was really a letdown, and yeah, that's why it is number 9 on my list. The next film, I decided to move it a little bit higher up on my list. It was originally my number 10, but to be honest, I actually forgot to mention it as my number 10, so you know what? It is now my number 8. This is Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, and honestly, this is kind of a better spot for it. I keep on trying to convince myself that I enjoyed this movie, but it was just really boring. Nothing really happened. It was a very convoluted plot. Nothing really happened in this movie. I've been saying this from the beginning, is this movie would have made a great book. It would have made a great book. J.K. Rowling is a great writer when it comes to novels, but when it comes to a screenplay, she just doesn't know how to write an exciting and eventful story that has the 3-act structure, that just makes sense, that has a fulfilling narrative that is contained in its own story. The first Fantastic Beasts movie I enjoyed very much, and I was kind of looking forward to this movie, but this movie was just really disappointing. The characters were bland. Some of the character decisions were just really bad. I didn't enjoy this movie at all. Johnny Depp was fine. This movie was fine in general. The twist at the end, I think it makes sense if you really, but the same thing with Cloverfield Paradox. If you really try to smash everything together, you can make it make sense, but as it is on its own, this movie is just kind of a mess, and it's very disappointing. Definitely the worst Harry Potter movie of them all. I always said that Harry Potter was the most consistently good franchise of all of them. Like, Star Wars had its mishaps, Marvel had a couple of mishaps, DC had a couple of mishaps, but the Harry Potter universe, all of them are good except for this one. This is not a good movie, and that is why it's on my disappointing list. Alright, so now we're down to number 7. This is the second most disappointing movie of the year for me, and this was Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. This movie was just flat out bad. I did not like this movie. The first 40 or so minutes wasn't bad. It was fine. It kind of had an interesting-ish plot, kind of contrived, and you can't really do too much with the Jurassic Park franchise. As dinosaurs get out, dinosaurs eat people, repeat and repeat over and over again, and this movie was just the same. They tried to do something different, which I can appreciate, but everything in the mansion was decently directed, but it's so cartoony, and none of it it was not entertaining at all. It was just kind of all over the place. The twist with the little girl being a clone is the dumbest thing I've seen all year. I did not like this movie at all. In the very first Talking Movies podcast, I actually talked about how I would have changed this movie to make it different, And so if you go back and watch that, I have time codes in the description. I'll have more thoughts on this movie on that since I didn't do a review. But this movie was just overall just very disappointing. I did not enjoy myself watching it. I did watch it a second time, and yeah, I can watch it. I can force myself to watch it. It's not terrible, but it is not a good movie at all. It's kind of soured me on the franchise more so than Fantastic Beasts. I am excited to see where they're going with that one, but with this franchise, I could just be done. If they don't make another one, I don't care. Where they end off in this movie just doesn't get me excited, and so I don't know what's next for this franchise, but for now, this movie just really soured me on it, and this is my number 7 of the year for most disappointing. Now, my number 6 on the list, which is actually my most disappointing movie of the year by far. I was so pumped for this movie. I love the first one. The original is one of my favorite animated movies of all time, and people love this movie. Everybody loves it. My brother loved it. All my siblings loved it. My parents liked it. I didn't like this movie, and I'm talking about Ralph Breaks the Internet. I hated this movie, and it's such a disappointment because I was looking forward to it so much. I love Wreck-It Ralph. Don't get me wrong, guys. Wreck-It Ralph, I watched it the day before. I love that movie. It makes me tear up at the end every time. And the way I've been putting it together is I never did my review, which I'm very upset. I've been wanting to talk about this movie on my channel for a while. But the way I think of this movie is the first one, they went into the pitching room at Disney and they said, okay, what if we had a movie about Ralph from Fix It Felix, and he came in saying, I don't want to be a bad guy anymore. I'm tired of being a bad guy. No one likes me. I want to be accepted. I want to go and do my own thing and explore this really cool world in an arcade. And it's a very cool world. It's very well set up. Has some great callbacks like old video games and stuff like that, and references everywhere. But for the most part, that entire movie is original, and it takes place in its own video games that it makes on its own. And this movie, the sequel, just felt like they went into the pitching room saying, okay, what if Ralph went to the internet? What if that happened? What if we just rip off the Emoji Movie? Huh? But it's Ralph and it's Disney, so you can throw Disney characters in there. We can just smash people in the face with different internet references and comment sections and this and that and this and that, and forget about the characters, because there are no character development in this movie. They try, it's kind of there, and they have a decent little storyline with Ralph and Vanellope, but it just was not, it felt like an afterthought. It really did. I hated this movie. I was not entertained at all. I was bored throughout. The ending was just kind of weak. There is a 10-minute section in this movie that I think is fantastic. And it's from the Disney princess scene to the musical scene with Vanellope. That 10-minute section is fantastic. Everything else bored me to tears. Gord is really good, or Gordo, whatever his name is. He was hilarious. Everything else in this movie, I can just forget about. I never want to watch this movie again. I really just hated this movie. But the after credit scene is hilarious. It is one of my favorite things that I've seen all year. So this movie was just such a disappointment. I hated this movie, which was such a disappointment because that's how much I love the first one. But yeah, that wraps up my top 5 disappointing movies of the year. And now let's head into my top 5 worst movies of the year, starting at my number 5. Peter Rabbit was god awful. I hated this movie. There's one hilarious joke in it with the rooster. Every single time he sees the sun comes up, he freaks out, and I love that part of the movie. But everything else is just silly. I didn't care for it. It was not my type of movie. I was bored, and it kind of made me mad, which is so strange. I had a rant about this movie for about an hour, so I'll kind of shorten it up here. But this movie does not make sense whatsoever, because the rabbits are talking, and they talk to what's his name, Donald Gleason from Star Wars, and he's like talking to him, and Donald Gleason can understand him. But at the end, when the rabbit goes to whatever her face is, her name, I forgot the actress, but then he won't talk to her to explain everything. And so what's the rules of this world? Can he hear them or can he not? But the rooster, he's screaming, but then the people hear the rooster noises, right? So how does he hear the rabbit? Nothing makes sense. This movie made me angry after walking out of it. I ranted about it for an hour. I could rant about it for another hour if I wanted to. This movie was not good. I had zero expectations for this movie, so it's not disappointing. It's just flat out bad. At number 4 is The Hurricane Heist, and yes, I did watch this movie because I wanted to fill out my top worst movies of the year, and so I sat through Hurricane Heist. I watched it with an audio commentary with Chris Stuckman, which made it so much more tolerable, but this movie was just kind of, it's called Hurricane Heist. What do you expect? It's silly, low budget, nothing makes sense, it's ridiculous, the script is terrible, the acting is terrible, the special effects are some of the worst I've seen all year, but it has some fun moments, I guess. There's one cool action sequence where they had to take down this like cell tower, but it didn't really make sense. It was exciting-ish kind of. The commentary was good that I watched it with, so that was fun. But this movie was just really bad. It's just nothing about it. I won't watch it again. Obviously, it's kind of forgettable. I'm losing it as I'm talking about it, but that movie was just very bad, not good at all, not really worth the dollar I spent on Redbox for this one. But yeah, Hurricane Heist was a terrible movie. I can't believe that was released in theaters. It should have been like a straight to DVD movie, but my theater is a smaller theater that I work at, and we got that movie, which is ridiculous. We even had like a standee for it. I don't understand how this movie got made and was put in theaters in a wide release. This movie deserved to be in a DVD bin. The third worst movie this year is Slender Man. Now, this movie was a disaster. I love horror movies. It is my favorite genre. This movie was so bad. It was not entertaining. It was kind of laughable at many points. You could tell that it was edited down to be PG-13. There's a scene with like the girl saying, "Oh, the police took the laptop." And the next scene, they have the laptop and they're typing on it, doing research. What are you talking about? And they're like, and it is the laptop. Don't tell me it's a different laptop. It is the laptop, and it makes no sense. This movie is a disaster. There's one character where in the trailer, I'll say this, in the trailer, she like stabs her eye in like the classroom or something like that. And we were waiting for that scene. It's not in the movie. So she's in this movie, that character, and she disappears at one point. She never comes back, never mentioned again. They just forgot about her, even though her apparent death scene is in the trailer. So I don't know what happened there. This movie was a disaster front and back. The performances from one girl was good, but she was the first one to die. She was in Oculus, and she was great in that movie. But this movie, she is just not, she's completely wasted. The other actresses are not good at all. The story is terrible. The true story of the Slender Man, there's a documentary called Beware the Slender Man. I love that documentary. If you want to get scared by a Slender Man story, watch that documentary. It's actually kind of terrifying. True story of these two girls who took their friend out into the forest. And it's kind of disturbing, but this movie just loses that all. Maybe it's too soon, I don't know. This movie would just played it too safe. It wasn't risky. The Slender Man himself didn't really make sense. He's like a tree. He made tree noises. What is he? What's the mythology here? There was none. This movie just was jump scare after jump scare, and there weren't even good jump scares. And so this movie this is just bad. It was a fun theater experience because me and my friend just laughed our asses off watching this movie, just shaking our heads. It was so bad. I did not like this movie at all. Okay, my number 2 movie is The Predator. Now, this movie was so ridiculously bad. I was watching it with a friend, and we were laughing during this movie. Not because it was funny, but because it was bad. This movie, the action was just very shaky and bad and terrible. And the worst part about it is Shane Black. I love Iron Man 3. I love Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. And The Nice Guys is my favorite comedy of all time. So what happened with this movie? It's not funny. The action's bad. The acting's bad. None of the performances are good. Like I said, there's nothing in this movie works. There is one great scene with the kid from The Room, which I think is hilarious. The kid, I'll spoil the spoilers for The Predator, I guess. That came out in, July? So the kid gets his hands on the Predator helmet, okay? And he's walking around during Halloween, knocking on doors, and the guy doesn't answer the door, and the kid is starting to walk away, and then the guy walks up with like a beer can, and he throws it at the kid, right? And then the kid turns around, the helmet pulls like a missile launcher out of the helmet, and he blows up the house. He kills the guy. The kid kills a drunk guy in a house. And then these two bullies that were bullying him earlier in the film are there, and they see it, and then the kid goes like that to scare them away. What was that? It was so ridiculously funny. It's the funniest thing I've seen all year, but it wasn't supposed to be funny. It was like the kid getting back at the bullies type thing, but he blew up some innocent guy in his house just wanting to be drunk on Halloween. How dare him? This kid was terrible in this movie, and I love that actor. He's great in The Room. But in this movie, everything fails. Nothing in this movie is good. The Mega Predator was stupid. The CGI dogs, the Predator dogs, were awful. One of the worst action sequences I've seen all year, in a year where we had Mission Impossible. Like, the action scenes in that movie was so incredible, and this movie is so incredibly bad. It pales in comparison. Shane Black, you broke my heart. This movie was terrible. Why was this movie released? I don't understand. Predator, the entire franchise is probably dead now because of this movie, and honestly, I'm kind of glad it is, because just don't touch the franchise anymore. Leave it alone. Shane Black, just step away, do your own comedy, stick with what you know, and just get rid of this movie. I never want to see it again, never want to think about it again. This movie was terrible, but it is nothing like my number one movie of the year, which is The Open House. This movie was so bad. It's a Netflix film. It has the kid from, what's it called? Don't Breathe? Yeah, the kid from Don't Breathe, and it's supposed to be a horror movie, but it's not scary. The acting is terrifying. Or not the acting. Yeah, the acting is terrifying. Nothing in this movie works. It is so ridiculously boring. And once again, I watched this with an audio commentary with Chris Stuckman and John Flickinger, and I fell asleep during the commentary, and they're very entertaining dudes. There's nothing wrong with that commentary. But this movie was so incredibly boring. They were bored. I was bored. This movie made no sense. It is not scary at all. Nothing, like, it's an open house and people stay there, and the killer, I don't even remember what the killer was. It's super forgettable. The ending, I think everybody died in the end. I don't know. He, like, the villain threw water on the kid to freeze him outside instead of just stabbing him. What was that about? Why don't you just stab him if you're trying to kill this family, and then he gets away, but he dies anyway? So why didn't you just kill him there? Nothing made sense. The killer was dumb. It wasn't scary. The acting was bad. Nothing about this movie was good. It was super forgettable. I'm trying to, like, remember what happened in this movie, but like I said, I fell asleep during a commentary of all things. I had to rewind and watch this part again. It was so bad. None of this movie made sense. The acting was terrible. The directing was terrible. This movie does not deserve to be seen anywhere. At least it wasn't released in theaters like Hurricane Heist. But either way, this movie was terrible. And so if you guys saw it, I'm sure you think the same. But yeah. That is my top 5 worst movies of the year, and then top 5 most disappointing of the year is making my top 10 worst/disappointing movies of 2018 list. Thanks guys for watching this review. Check out my top 10 best movies. It is a full conversation with my brother, and we talk about a bunch of stuff, so check that out. It's very good conversation, very good movies in that list. And so check that out. Subscribe to the channel for a great 2019. Hopefully we do good this year. I'm going to try to do a lot more reviews, a lot more podcasts. We're going to be doing a lot, hopefully. So subscribe to the channel. Can't wait for the movies this year. Hopefully I won't hit... actually, I kind of want to hit more bad movies, because my goal is to hit 100 movies of the year. This year I hit 75. I will probably end up hitting 80 by the end of the year. But yeah, so that is the worst movies of the year list, and that is 2018. I'll see you guys tomorrow on January 1st, hopefully with my top 10 most anticipated movies of the year list, or probably just going through the entire year, going through the movies, saying which ones we're excited about, which ones we're not excited about, just going through everything. So most anticipated movies of the year list coming soon, so subscribe, and I'll see you guys all in my next video.